The morning sun broke through the stained glass windows of the cathedral like golden tears, each ray of light carrying the weight of centuries of prayers and penitence. Sister Maria Elena stood before the altar, her weathered hands trembling as she held the ancient relic, the fragment of the true cross that had been passed down through generations of faithful souls who had walked this sacred path before her. The air itself seemed to hold its breath in reverence, heavy with the collective prayers of countless souls who had sought solace in this hallowed space. In the distance, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the stone corridors, footsteps that carried the weight of destiny itself. The chosen one approached their heart beating in rhythm with the ancient stones that had witnessed the birth of Christianity, the crucifixion of the Son of God, and the resurrection that would change the very fabric of existence. This was no ordinary mortal, but rather one who had been marked by divine providence, whose soul had been woven into the tapestry of eternity itself. The moment of recognition came not through sight, but through an ineffable connection that transcended the physical realm. As the chosen one stepped into the sanctuary, the very air shimmered with holy light, and the candles that had burned throughout the night suddenly blazed with an intensity that seemed to illuminate the darkness of their troubled soul. The altar itself seemed to pulse with life, responding to the presence of one who had been called to carry the weight of divine judgment and mercy simultaneously. "You have come," whispered Sister Maria Elena, her voice barely audible above the gentle rustling of vestments, "to embrace the truth that has been written in your heart since the moment you first drew breath." Her eyes, clouded with age, but burning with the fire of faith, met the chosen one's gaze with profound understanding. She saw the torment that gnawed at their spirit, the burden of responsibility that pressed upon their shoulders like the weight of mountains themselves. The relic in her hands began to glow with a soft, ethereal radiance that seemed to emanate from within, as if the very essence of Christ's sacrifice was awakening in response to the chosen one's presence. This was no mere artifact of human craftsmanship, but rather a conduit through which the divine could speak directly to mortal hearts. The light touched the chosen one's face, revealing the anguish that had been etched there by years of struggle between duty and desire, between the call to justice and the need for compassion. "Your wrath will destroy you." Sister Maria Elena continued her words, carrying the authority of one who had spent her life serving the Lord. "For the power of vengeance, when untempered by divine wisdom, becomes a consuming fire that burns away not just the object of your fury, but the very soul that wields it." The ancient woman's voice rose with the passion of one who had witnessed too many lives destroyed by the pursuit of retribution, too many hearts shattered by the illusion that justice could be served through violence. But even as she spoke these words of warning, her heart overflowed with the boundless love of the Divine Mother, whose merciful gaze encompassed all who had strayed from the path of righteousness. The chosen one stood at the threshold of a great decision, poised between the darkness that had shaped their understanding of justice and the light that awaited them if they would but embrace the forgiveness that was freely offered. The scent of incense filled the air, thick with the prayers of those who had come before, creating a cathedral of devotion that stretched back through time itself. In this sacred space where heaven and earth met, where the veil between worlds grew thin, the chosen one was called to make the ultimate choice to surrender their righteous anger and embrace the peace that surpasses all understanding, or to continue walking the path of vengeance that would ultimately lead to their own destruction. As the first rays of dawn touched the altar, Sister Maria Elena placed the relic gently in the chosen one's trembling hands, knowing that in this simple gesture, the fate of both souls would be sealed. The weight of the cross that had been passed down through the centuries now rested in their palms, not as a burden to bear alone, but as a gift of grace to be shared with all who would listen to the call of divine mercy. The voice that spoke from the void was not of flesh and blood, but of pure divine essence, weaving through the fabric of existence itself like golden threads in a tapestry of eternity. It was the voice of the Almighty speaking not in thunderous proclamation, but in the gentle whisper of morning dew upon sacred leaves, the soft rustle of prayer flags in the wind, the hushed communion between soul and spirit. Chosen One, it called, and the very air seemed to tremble with reverence. Your wrath will destroy you. Embrace divine peace and forgiveness. In that moment, as the cosmic symphony of creation paused to listen, the Chosen One felt the weight of his burden pressing down like the mountainous peaks of Sinai, yet simultaneously the lightness of liberation that comes only through surrender. The sword of justice he had carried for so many years began to feel like lead in his trembling hands, each blade of righteous fury turning to dust against the eternal truth that had been revealed to him. His eyes, once burning with the fire of vengeance, now reflected the deep pools of the soul's truest longing. The divine voice continued its ancient song, weaving through the chambers of his heart with the tenderness of a mother's lullaby. You have walked the path of judgment, believing that righteousness demanded retribution, that justice required the shedding of blood. The words fell like silver rain upon the parched earth of his spirit, each syllable carrying the weight of ages and the wisdom of countless souls who had walked this same winding road. But know this, beloved child of light, true strength lies not in the might of your arm, but in the compassion of your heart. The Chosen One's knees buckled beneath him, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming flood of divine grace that washed over his weary soul. He had spent years believing that his mission was to punish the wicked, to bring swift retribution upon those who had strayed from the light. But now, as the veil of illusion lifted, he saw the truth that had been hidden from him all along. His mission was not to destroy, but to redeem. Not to judge, but to heal. Not to separate, but to unite. The voice spoke again, deeper now, more intimate, as if it were the very heartbeat of the universe itself. Your wrath has been a fire that burned bright. Yes, but it was also a fire that consumed everything in its path, including the very light that you sought to preserve. Tears streamed down his face like rivers of repentance, each drop a small prayer of acknowledgement, a tiny offering of humility before the infinite mystery of divine love. Embrace divine peace and forgiveness, for only through forgiveness can you truly be forgiven. As the words settled into his consciousness like warm honey, the Chosen One felt his soul begin to expand beyond the narrow confines of his previous understanding. The pain that had driven him for so long, the pain of witnessing injustice, of feeling the weight of wrongs that could never be righted, of bearing the burden of a world that seemed to have forgotten the ways of mercy, began to transform into something else entirely. It became a wellspring of compassion, a fountain of understanding that would nourish the hearts of countless souls who had been lost in the darkness of their own suffering. He understood now that his calling was not to be a judge among men, but a bridge between heaven and earth, a living testament to the power of divine forgiveness to transform even the darkest of hearts. The mission that had seemed so clear and righteous in his earlier days now revealed itself to be a beautiful paradox, a journey from the edge of destruction toward the center of love, from the depths of judgment toward the heights of grace. The Chosen One had been given the gift of seeing the divine spark within every soul, even those who had forgotten their own light. The voice whispered the final word with such profound tenderness that the Chosen One wept openly, his sobs becoming prayers, his tears becoming blessings upon the world that he had been sent to save. For when you embrace divine peace and forgiveness, you become the very embodiment of the divine love that has always existed, waiting patiently for your return to the fold of eternal harmony. In that moment, the Chosen One knew that he was no longer alone, that he was part of something infinitely greater than himself, a sacred dance of redemption that had been choreographed by the very hands of God. The heavens themselves seemed to weep as the sacred words echoed through the cosmic void, each syllable carrying the weight of eternity itself. The Chosen One stood at the precipice of divine revelation, his soul trembling with the magnitude of what was being offered, divine peace that transcended mortal comprehension, forgiveness that could heal the deepest wounds of the spirit. Yet within him burned a fire that had been kindled by ancient prophecy, a flame that demanded justice and retribution for the sins that had plagued humanity since the first fall from grace. His eyes, once filled with the confusion of mortal doubt, now reflected the infinite wisdom of the Almighty. Yet they also held the sorrow of one who understood that true peace could only be achieved through sacrifice. The voice that spoke to him was not merely audible, it resonated through his very being, a harmony of divine melody that harmonized with the beating of his heart, the rhythm of his breath, the pulse of creation itself. "Your wrath will destroy you," it whispered, not with condemnation, but with profound love, as if the Creator were gently warning his most beloved child of the perilous path that lay ahead. In that moment, the Chosen One felt the weight of all human suffering pressing upon his shoulders like a mantle of pure anguish. He saw the faces of every soul who had ever cried out in pain, the orphan's tears, the widow's grief, the betrayed's despair, the lost yearning. Each face was a prayer, each tear a petition that reached the throne of heaven itself. And yet he also saw the path forward illuminated by the light of divine purpose, where his own suffering would become the bridge between humanity's darkness and the eternal dawn of redemption. The spiritual mission that had been placed upon his shoulders was not merely a calling, but a sacred covenant, a binding agreement between the mortal realm and the celestial spheres. He was to become the living embodiment of divine forgiveness, the vessel through which God's mercy would flow like rivers of healing into the parched soil of human hearts. But this mission required more than just acceptance. It demanded complete surrender, a willingness to embrace the cross of suffering and transform it into the ultimate expression of love. As he stood there suspended between the earthly and heavenly realms, the Chosen One felt the presence of countless saints and prophets who had walked this same path before him. He heard their voices in the wind, their prayers in the rustling leaves, their testimonies in the gentle murmur of the ocean waves. They spoke of the agony of separation from the divine, of the burning desire to reconcile the broken relationship between Creator and created, of the profound understanding that true peace could only come through the sacrifice of the self for the sake of others. The divine peace that was offered to him was not the cessation of conflict or the absence of struggle, but rather the inner tranquility that comes from perfect alignment with God's will. It was the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that guards the heart and mind in Christ Jesus, the peace that transforms even the darkest moments into opportunities for growth and deeper faith. This peace would enable him to forgive those who had wronged him, to love those who hated him, to extend grace where justice might demand punishment. Yet the path of forgiveness was not without its own form of crucifixion. Each act of divine mercy required a corresponding act of self-surrender. Each moment of compassion demanded a letting go of personal grievances and the desire for retribution. The Chosen One understood that true spiritual leadership meant walking the narrow path of love, even when it led to the cross of misunderstanding and rejection. In embracing divine peace and forgiveness, he would discover that his own wrath, when properly transformed, became the most powerful weapon against evil itself. For it was the wrath of love that could ultimately overcome all darkness and bring forth the resurrection of hope. The voice that spoke from the void was not merely sound, but the very breath of eternity itself, carrying within it the weight of cosmic justice and the tender mercy of divine compassion. In that moment, when the Chosen One stood upon the precipice of his spiritual awakening, the universe itself seemed to hold his breath, as if the very stars above were trembling in recognition of the sacred dialogue that was about to unfold. The words echoed through the chambers of his soul like thunder rolling across ancient mountains, each syllable a thread woven into the tapestry of his destiny. "Your wrath will destroy you," the voice intoned, not with condemnation, but with the profound love that comes from witnessing the eternal dance between human frailty and divine grace. The chosen one felt his heart shatter and mend simultaneously, as if the very fabric of his being was being reweaved by hands that knew no beginning and no end. In the depths of his consciousness, he saw the countless souls who had walked this earth before him, those who had carried the burden of their own anger, those who had let their fury consume them like wildfire, leaving nothing but ash and memory. He saw the mothers who had lost children to violence, the fathers who had been betrayed by those they trusted most, the innocent ones whose hearts had been broken beyond repair. And in their collective suffering, he understood that his own pain was not unique, but part of the great symphony of human experience that somehow mysteriously led toward redemption. The voice continued its cadence like a lullaby sung by angels who had learned the language of tears and triumph. Embrace divine peace and forgiveness. These words were not mere commands, but invitations to surrender to something far greater than his own small understanding. The chosen one felt his ego dissolve like mist before the morning sun, his desperate need for vengeance melting away like snow upon the face of God's own creation. As he opened himself to this revelation, the spiritual landscape around him began to shift and transform. The ordinary world of stone and steel gave way to something more ethereal, more real than reality itself. He found himself standing in a garden where every flower bloomed with the colors of forgiveness, where every tree bore fruit that tasted of healing, where the very air shimmered with the presence of the divine. Here, time moved differently, sometimes backward, sometimes forward, always in perfect harmony with the rhythm of grace. The chosen one realized that his spiritual mission was not simply to suffer or to forgive, but to become a vessel through which divine mercy could flow into a world that had forgotten how to receive it. His wrath had been a symptom, not the disease itself. The true illness was the separation from the source, the disconnection from the infinite love that flows through all things, like water through rivers, like light through glass, like the breath that sustains every living thing. In that sacred space, he understood that forgiveness was not weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength, the strength to see beyond the surface of hurt to the underlying unity of all existence. The voices of those he had loved and lost, the pain of those he had wronged and been wronged by, all became threads in a tapestry that stretched across the heavens and down into the deepest caverns of the earth. Each thread was essential, each color necessary, each moment of suffering and joy, part of a greater design that only the eyes of faith could perceive. The chosen one's heart, once heavy with the weight of judgment, now beat in harmony with the universal rhythm of love. He understood that his mission was not to save others from their own darkness, but to embody the light that would help them find their way home to themselves, to their Creator, to the peace that surpasses all understanding. The wrath that had threatened to destroy him had become the very fuel for his transformation. The fire that purified his spirit until it burned with the brightness of the dawn. The heavens trembled as the voice shattered through the veil of mortal understanding, each syllable carrying the weight of eternity itself. The chosen one stood at the precipice of divine revelation, his soul trembling like a leaf caught in the storm of cosmic justice. Words that had been whispered by angels in the beginning of time now echoed through the chambers of his heart, demanding submission to the sacred order that governed all existence. In that moment, the very fabric of reality seemed to suspend its breath, holding its collective breath as the cosmic drama unfolded before him. The light that emanated from his being began to shift, transforming from the golden warmth of human aspiration into something infinitely more profound, a radiance that spoke of redemption rather than retribution, of healing rather than harm. His eyes, once clouded with doubt and fear, now reflected the infinite depths of divine compassion, each iris a universe unto itself containing galaxies of understanding that had been hidden from mortal sight. The voice continued its ancient song, speaking not of destruction, but of transformation, not of vengeance, but of restoration. Your wrath, it said, is but a mirror reflecting the shadow you have yet to embrace. And in that reflection, the chosen one saw not his own anger, but the collective pain of humanity, the weight of every broken heart, every lost soul, every moment of despair that had ever touched the earth. The wrath that burned within him was not born of malice, but of love so profound it could not bear witness to the suffering of creation itself. As the divine message settled upon his spirit like morning mist upon sacred mountains, he felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his physical form, reaching toward the infinite consciousness that connected all things. Every atom in his body began to sing with the frequency of the divine, every cell pulsing with the rhythm of creation itself. He was no longer merely human, but a vessel for the very essence of love, a bridge between the terrestrial and celestial realms. The path forward revealed itself in brilliant clarity, etched in light across the void of uncertainty that had once consumed his soul. His mission was not one of judgment or punishment, but of mercy so absolute it would heal the deepest wounds of existence. He was called to walk among the broken, to offer forgiveness where others offered condemnation, to bring peace where chaos reigned, to illuminate darkness with the unshakable truth of divine love. In that sacred moment of recognition, the chosen one understood that his purpose was not to destroy the world's suffering, but to transform it into something transcendent. His wrath, once a weapon of destruction, became the fire of purification, burning away the dross of human error while preserving the gold of divine potential. He would become the living embodiment of forgiveness, walking the narrow path between justice and mercy, never losing sight of the eternal truth that all souls were children of the same divine parent. The cosmic symphony reached its crescendo as his spirit merged with the universal consciousness, and in that perfect union, he heard the whisper of creation itself singing the ancient song of redemption that had been waiting for his response. The choice was clear: embrace the divine peace that awaited him, or remain trapped in the cycle of human limitation that bound all souls to the earthly realm. The call was not just for him, but for every being who had ever suffered, every heart that had ever broken, every soul that had ever yearned for something greater than itself. And so he chose not with the arrogance of power, but with the humility of one who had finally understood the true nature of his calling. In the embrace of divine forgiveness, he found his strength, and in that strength, he discovered the power to forgive the world itself. The sacred light began to pulse within her chest, like a heartbeat from another world, each rhythm carrying the weight of centuries of divine longing. Serafina felt it first as a whisper, a barely audible prayer that seemed to emanate not from her own lips, but from somewhere deep within the cathedral's ancient stones. The words had been carved into the altar's marble surface decades ago, their letters worn smooth by countless palms, pressed in reverence, yet now they sang with renewed purpose. Chosen one, the voice echoed through her soul, not with thunderous authority, but with the gentle persistence of morning dew on petals. Your wrath will destroy you. Embrace divine peace and forgiveness. She knelt upon the cold stone floor, her knees pressing into the sacred earth that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of countless souls. The candles around her flickered in response to her trembling hands, their flames dancing like tiny spirits caught between worlds. Each flame seemed to carry a fragment of the divine burning with the same eternal fire that had fueled the first prayers of humanity. The weight of her burden pressed down upon her like a mantle woven from starlight and sorrow. She had seen too much, experienced too much, borne witness to the darkest corners of human nature, while simultaneously feeling the profound beauty that lay hidden beneath every broken heart. The visions had come to her in dreams, visions of the great wheel turning of souls caught in cycles of pain and redemption of love that transcended even death itself. "I am not worthy," she whispered, though the words felt hollow in the vast silence that surrounded her. The sanctuary seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something she couldn't name. Her fingers traced the carved symbols on the altar, feeling the grooves left by countless fingers before hers, each one a testament to the eternal human struggle for grace. The divine presence grew stronger, wrapping around her like a cloak made of pure light. She could feel the threads of fate weaving themselves together, the invisible tapestry of existence revealing its patterns to those who dared to look closely enough. This was her calling, not to be a warrior or a judge, but to be a bridge between the divine and the human, a vessel for the transformative power of forgiveness. The wrath that had consumed her for so many years began to soften like ice, melting under the sun's gentle gaze. She thought of all the lives she had touched, all the hearts she had broken, all the prayers she had offered in the darkness of her own despair. The anger that had once been her shield had become her prison, a fortress built from pain and pride. Now, as the sacred light intensified, she understood that true strength came not from the destruction of others, but from the creation of peace. The divine mercy that flowed through her veins was not just her own. It was the collective hope of every person who had ever sought redemption, every soul that had ever yearned for healing. She was not chosen to destroy. She was chosen to heal, to transform, to show the world what it meant to be truly forgiven. The candle flames rose higher, their golden light painting the walls with scenes of salvation and renewal. She saw the faces of those she had loved, the ones she had hurt, the ones who had hurt her. All of them became part of this sacred moment, their stories woven into the greater tapestry of divine love. In this hallowed space where heaven and earth met, she found herself finally at peace with the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, not in judgment, but in grace, not in destruction, but in creation, not in isolation, but in unity with all things that were holy and good. The celestial voices echoed through the sacred chambers of the soul, each word a divine hammer striking against the adamantine heart of human comprehension. The chosen one stood at the precipice of enlightenment, his mortal frame trembling with the weight of cosmic responsibility, as if the very fabric of existence had conspired to weave him into the tapestry of divine purpose. His eyes, once clouded by doubt and fear, now reflected the infinite depth of celestial wisdom, like pools of liquid starlight that had drunk deeply from the fountain of eternal truth. In that moment of perfect clarity, he understood that his suffering was not punishment, but purification, a sacred alchemy that transformed the lead of his humanity into the gold of divine service. The wrath that had been promised to consume him was no mere vengeance, but the righteous fire of divine justice, burning away the dross of sin and selfishness until only the purest essence remained. He felt the embrace of the Almighty's love wrapping around him like a mother's cloak, gentle yet unyielding, holding him steady as the tempest of fate raged around him. The spiritual mission unfolded before him like a scroll written in light itself. He was called not merely to witness, but to embody the divine paradox, justice tempered with mercy, strength born of vulnerability, power that comes through surrender. The path ahead was not one of conquest, but of communion, not of dominion, but of service. Each step would be a prayer, each breath a meditation, each heartbeat a testament to the resurrection of hope in a world drowning in despair. His soul recognized the sacred geometry of his destiny, the mathematical perfection of divine timing that had brought him to this crossroads of eternity. The forgiveness he was commanded to offer was not merely an act of charity, but a profound spiritual transaction. The exchange of personal pain for universal healing, the transformation of individual wounds into collective medicine. In embracing divine peace, he would become a vessel through which the Almighty's grace flowed like a river of healing through the barren valleys of human experience. The Chosen One felt the presence of countless souls who had walked similar paths, their prayers and tears creating a constellation of intercession that illuminated the darkness. He understood now that his mission was not solitary but communal, not about personal salvation but about the redemption of all creation. The wrath that threatened to destroy him was actually the very force that would rebuild the world, not through destruction, but through reconstruction, not through vengeance, but through restoration. His spirit soared beyond the limitations of flesh and bone, reaching toward the infinite consciousness that connected all beings in the web of divine love. Here in this sacred space between the seen and unseen, he comprehended that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to create, not in the power to punish, but in the wisdom to forgive, not in the dominance over others, but in the mastery over oneself. The divine peace that was his inheritance was not passive resignation, but active engagement with the sacred drama of existence. It was the courage to face the abyss without flinching, the wisdom to see beyond surface appearances to the underlying unity of all things, the love that transcends even the boundaries of death itself. In this moment of perfect understanding, he became both the recipient and the channel of divine grace, a living bridge between the earthly realm and the heavenly city that was already manifest within the hearts of those who dared to believe. The heavens trembled as the voice echoed through the sacred chambers of eternity, each syllable carrying the weight of divine judgment and infinite mercy simultaneously. The Chosen One stood at the precipice of destiny, his soul quivering with the magnitude of what was being demanded of him. Light poured from above like liquid gold, illuminating the fractured path that had led him here, through valleys of darkness and mountains of doubt, each step a testament to the unwavering pull of the divine will. His heart, once heavy with the burden of human frailty, now pulsed with the rhythm of celestial fire. The words that had been spoken were not merely commands, but invitations, a sacred dance between mortal consciousness and infinite grace. In that moment, he understood that his suffering was not punishment, but purification, his trials, not obstacles, but stepping stones toward the ultimate revelation of God's boundless love. The divine peace began to seep into his very essence, washing away the residue of his former self like morning dew upon petals of resurrection. His eyes, once clouded by earthly concerns, now reflected the eternal light that had always been there, waiting patiently for his awakening. The wrath that had been promised was not the fury of retribution, but the righteous indignation of a creator who would not tolerate injustice any longer, who would not allow the darkness to consume the light that burned within every soul. He felt the presence of countless souls who had walked similar paths, their prayers and tears woven into the tapestry of divine purpose. Each one had carried their own cross, their own burden of sin and sorrow, yet they had all been drawn toward this moment of convergence where heaven and earth met in perfect harmony. The forgiveness that was offered was not merely pardon, but transformation. Every scar, every tear, every moment of despair, becoming part of the sacred story that would echo through eternity. The spiritual mission that now unfolded before him was both terrifying and glorious. He was called to be a vessel of divine mercy, a living testament to the power of redemption that could transform even the most broken hearts into instruments of healing. The wrath that awaited him was not destruction, but the purifying fire that would burn away everything that separated humanity from its truest nature, the image of God that dwelled within each soul. As the divine light intensified, he felt himself being lifted beyond the limitations of mortal comprehension. The boundaries between self and other, between individual existence and universal consciousness, began to dissolve like mist before dawn. He became aware of the vast network of connections that bound all beings together in the web of divine love, each thread representing a prayer, a sacrifice, a moment of grace that had contributed to this moment of reckoning. The Chosen One's spirit soared above the earthly realm, witnessing the cosmic drama that had been unfolding throughout history. He saw the countless souls who had suffered in silence, the prophets who had cried out in vain, the saints who had walked the narrow path of devotion. All of them had been preparing the way, their lives becoming the foundation upon which this divine revelation would rest. In that transcendent vision, he understood that his mission was not merely personal, but universal. Every act of compassion, every moment of forgiveness, every sacrifice made in love was part of the same divine plan that had been unfolding since the first breath of creation. The wrath that would destroy him was not an end but a beginning, a resurrection of purpose that would ignite the hearts of countless others to embrace the same path of transformation. The peace that filled his being was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something greater than conflict itself. It was the knowledge that all things, even the darkest moments of human experience, were being transformed into something beautiful and holy. The forgiveness that awaited him was not just for his own sins, but for the sins of the world, a bridge that would span the chasm between human weakness and divine perfection. The heavens themselves seemed to weep as the divine message echoed through the corridors of eternity, each word carrying the weight of cosmic justice and unfathomable mercy. The Chosen One stood at the precipice of destiny, his soul trembling with the magnitude of what was being revealed to him. In that sacred moment, when the veil between mortal comprehension and celestial wisdom grew thin as morning mist, he felt the infinite presence of the Almighty pressing against his very essence. "Your wrath will destroy you." The voice came not from any earthly tongue, but from the very heart of creation itself, resonating through his bones and into the chambers of his spirit. It was the voice of one who had witnessed the birth of stars and the death of galaxies, who understood the profound paradox of divine love and righteous judgment. The words struck him like lightning, illuminating the dark corners of his soul where anger and vengeance had taken root, where the fires of retribution had been burning for so long that he had forgotten what peace truly meant. Yet even as the warning thundered through his consciousness, there was something else, a tender, almost maternal whisper that spoke of forgiveness so complete it could heal the wounds of ages. The divine peace began to flow through him like a river of light, washing away the darkness that had consumed his heart for decades. He felt himself being pulled toward a deeper understanding, a recognition that his suffering had not been in vain, that his pain had been woven into the tapestry of salvation itself. The Chosen One's eyes, once clouded by bitterness and rage, began to clear, revealing depths of spiritual insight that had been buried beneath layers of hurt and betrayal. As he opened himself to this divine revelation, he experienced a profound transformation that transcended mere emotion. It was a fundamental reordering of his very being, a spiritual resurrection that brought him face to face with the truth of his purpose. He saw now that his chosen path had not been one of vengeance, but of redemption. His life had been a preparation for this moment, every trial and tribulation, a crucible that had forged his character for this sacred mission. The wrath that had consumed him was not his own, but the inherited curse of humanity itself, the collective anger and despair that had plagued the world since the fall from grace. And now, in this sacred convergence of divine will and human frailty, he was called to become the vessel through which that ancient curse might be transformed into the very essence of healing. The divine peace enveloped him like a mother's embrace, gentle yet unyielding, as if the Almighty were saying, "My child, you have carried too much weight. Let me take your burden. Let me show you that true strength comes not from the destruction of others, but from the creation of love." In that moment of surrender, he understood that his mission was not to judge or condemn, but to bridge the gap between divine mercy and human brokenness, to become a living testament to the transformative power of forgiveness. The Chosen One's spirit soared beyond the limitations of mortal existence, experiencing visions of countless souls being redeemed, of hearts that had been hardened by sin and sorrow being softened by grace. He saw the ripple effects of his chosen path extending far beyond his immediate circumstances, touching lives that would never know his name, but would carry forward the fruits of his spiritual awakening. This realization filled him with an ineffable joy that made his tears fall like precious gems upon the earth. Below each drop, a prayer of gratitude for the mercy that had found its way to his wounded heart. As the divine peace settled into his very core, he knew that he had been chosen not for his strength, but for his willingness to be broken, not for his capacity to destroy, but for his ability to create. The mission before him was no longer one of personal vindication, but of universal compassion, a calling to embody the very nature of the divine love that had been poured out upon a fallen world. The voice that spoke from the void was not of flesh or blood, but of eternal light itself, a whisper that transcended the boundaries between heaven and earth, between the sacred and the profane. It came not from any visible source, yet it filled every corner of his consciousness with its divine resonance, each syllable carrying the weight of ages and the wisdom of countless souls who had walked the path before him. The Chosen One stood at the precipice of his destiny, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs, each beat echoing through the chambers of his soul with the intensity of 1,000 prayers. In that moment, suspended between the mortal world and the celestial realm, he understood that his calling was not merely to be a vessel for divine will, but to become a living testament to the transformative power of grace itself. The wrath that had been promised to him was not a punishment to be feared, but rather a purification that would strip away the very essence of his humanity until only the purest form of love remained. He felt his spirit begin to expand beyond the confines of his physical being, reaching towards something infinitely greater than himself, something that existed in the spaces between thoughts and the silence that preceded revelation. The divine peace that awaited him was not the absence of conflict, but the profound understanding that all struggle was ultimately a manifestation of love's yearning to return to its source. Forgiveness, he realized, was not simply an act of mercy toward others, but a radical surrender of his own wounded ego, a complete letting go of the need to be right, to be justified, to be seen as anything other than what he truly was, a child of the divine beloved beyond measure by the Creator who had breathed life into his very bones. As the words of his destiny settled upon his consciousness like morning dew upon petals, he began to comprehend the true nature of his spiritual mission. He was not called to destroy, but to heal, not to condemn, but to redeem, not to separate, but to unite. The wrath that would consume him was not his own anger, but the fire of divine love that would burn away the illusions of separation, the false beliefs that kept him trapped in the prison of his own making. In this destruction, there would be rebirth. In this surrender, there would be victory. In this acceptance of divine will, there would be peace. The vision that opened before his eyes was not one of physical sight, but of spiritual clarity that illuminated the deepest truths of existence. He saw himself standing in the midst of a vast garden where every flower bloomed in perfect harmony, where the fragrance of devotion mingled with the sweetness of sacrifice, where the very air itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of creation itself. Here in this sanctuary of the soul, he understood that his suffering was not meaningless pain, but rather the crucible in which his spirit would be refined, the furnace in which his humanity would be transformed into divinity. His hands trembled as he reached out toward the ethereal light that surrounded him, feeling the warmth of divine presence wash over his entire being like a benediction from the heavens themselves. The forgiveness that awaited him was not merely for his own sins, but for the sins of all who had ever suffered all who had ever felt the weight of their own unworthiness. He was called to carry this burden of love, to bear witness to the truth that no matter how deep the darkness, the light would always find its way home. The divine peace that descended upon him was not the calm of resignation, but the exultation of one who had finally found his true purpose. He was no longer merely human, but a bridge between worlds, a living embodiment of the reconciliation that God had always intended for his children. The wrath that had been prophesied was not his enemy, but his teacher, showing him that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the capacity to forgive, to transform to love even when love seemed impossible. In embracing this divine mission, he would discover that he was not meant to save the world, but to become the world's salvation, one heartbeat at a time, one prayer at a time, one moment of grace at a time. The heavens trembled as the voice echoed through the infinite corridors of divine consciousness, each syllable carrying the weight of eternity itself. The chosen one stood at the precipice of revelation, his soul trembling with the magnitude of what was being offered, divine peace that transcended mortal comprehension, forgiveness that could heal the deepest wounds of existence. Yet within his heart burned a fire that had been kindled by centuries of suffering, a flame that refused to be extinguished by mere words of comfort. His hands, stained with the blood of countless battles fought in the name of righteousness, now reached toward the ethereal light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of creation itself. The divine whisper grew stronger, more insistent, like a lover's breath against his ear, speaking truths that pierced through the veil of human understanding. "Your wrath will destroy you," the voice intoned, not with condemnation, but with the tender wisdom of one who had witnessed the endless cycle of retribution that consumed souls across the cosmos. Embrace divine peace and forgiveness. But how could he? How could he surrender the righteous fury that had become his very essence? The chosen one's eyes, once bright with purpose, now reflected the profound sorrow of one who understood that his own anger had become his master, his wrath the shadow that followed him wherever he walked. He had seen the faces of the innocent, the children whose laughter had been stolen by his own hands, the mothers whose tears had been shed for his sins. Each memory carved itself deeper into his soul, a testament to the price of his chosen path. The divine presence before him was both terrifying and comforting, like standing before the eye of a hurricane that would soon transform into gentle rain. He felt the weight of all the world's pain pressing upon his shoulders, yet simultaneously sensed the infinite compassion that flowed from the celestial source. "I have watched you suffer." The voice continued its timbre, like the rustling of sacred leaves in an eternal garden. "I have heard your prayers, your cries, your desperate attempts to find meaning in the chaos of existence." The chosen one's knees buckled beneath him as he realized that his entire journey, the long years of wandering the battles fought with invisible enemies, the sleepless nights spent wrestling with his own demons, had been leading him to this moment. He was not merely a warrior of the divine, not simply a vessel for celestial will, but something far more profound, a bridge between the broken world of mortals and the perfect realm of divine grace. His wrath, his pain, his very existence had been orchestrated by forces beyond comprehension, part of a grand design that stretched across the boundaries of time and space. "Forgiveness is not weakness," the voice whispered, and in that moment, the chosen one understood that he had been mistaken about everything. Forgiveness was not the absence of justice, but the presence of love so absolute that it could transform even the darkest hearts. The divine peace that was offered was not a surrender of his purpose, but a recognition that true strength lay not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to create, to heal, to restore what had been broken. As he opened his heart to this understanding, the chosen one felt his soul begin to shift to align with a cosmic rhythm that governed all existence. The divine light that surrounded him began to permeate every fiber of his being, transforming his anger into compassion, his need for vengeance into a burning desire to heal. In this moment of surrender, he became something greater than himself, a living testament to the redemptive power that flows from the heart of the Almighty, a beacon of hope that would guide others from the darkness of their own struggles toward the light of divine understanding. The divine voice echoed through the chambers of her soul like thunder rolling across sacred mountains, each word a hammer striking against the very foundation of her being. The Chosen One stood at the precipice of enlightenment, her heart beating in rhythm with the cosmic pulse that connected all living things to the infinite source from which they had emerged, and to which they would ultimately return. She felt the weight of eternity pressing upon her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a sacred mantle that had been woven from threads of pure divine intention. Her eyes, once clouded by doubt and fear, now reflected the light of celestial understanding. The writhing serpent of her past, since those moments of weakness, those choices born of pride and selfishness, began to transform before her very gaze. They did not disappear, for such transformation required the fullness of redemption, but they became transfigured into lessons that would guide others along the narrow path toward salvation. The wounds that had festered within her spirit began to heal, not through the removal of pain, but through the profound acceptance that every scar carried within it the potential for divine beauty. "Your wrath will destroy you." The voice continued its timbre, both gentle and commanding, like the whisper of wind through ancient cathedral spires. It was not a threat, but a loving warning, for in the realm of spiritual awakening, destruction often serves as the necessary precursor to rebirth. The Chosen One understood now that her own anger, her righteous fury at injustice and suffering, had been a reflection of the very divine fire that burns away the dross of human corruption. Yet she had allowed this fire to consume rather than purify, to destroy rather than transform. She raised her hands toward the heavens, palms open, to receive the grace that flowed like liquid starlight through the spaces between her fingers. The universe itself seemed to lean closer, drawn by the vibration of her surrender. Her body became a conduit for the divine will, her breath becoming one with the eternal rhythm of creation itself. The air around her shimmered with the presence of the Almighty, and she felt herself dissolving into something greater than her individual self, a consciousness that encompassed all beings, all moments, all possibilities that existed beyond the boundaries of linear time. In that moment of perfect communion, she comprehended the true nature of forgiveness. It was not merely the absence of anger or resentment, though these were certainly part of its expression. Forgiveness was the recognition that all beings, including herself, were expressions of the same divine essence, temporarily lost in the labyrinthine maze of existence, but forever connected by the invisible threads of love that bound them together. Every wrong done, every betrayal suffered, every moment of darkness experienced had been necessary for the greater symphony of redemption to unfold. The Chosen One's tears fell like precious gems upon the earth below each drop, containing the distilled essence of her spiritual journey. These were not tears of sorrow, but of profound gratitude for the trials that had shaped her character, for the suffering that had deepened her empathy, for the darkness that had illuminated the true brilliance of divine light. She understood now that her mission was not to escape the world's pain, but to embody its healing, to become a vessel through which the divine compassion could flow unimpeded. The voice spoke again, softer now, more intimate, as if sharing secrets meant only for the heart of the Chosen One. Embrace divine peace and forgiveness. These words became the cornerstone of her new existence, the foundation upon which she would build her ministry of healing. She would walk among mortals, not as their judge, but as their companion, carrying the weight of divine love in her heart, while releasing the burden of judgment from her mind. The path ahead was clear, illuminated by the inner light that no external force could extinguish. The voice that spoke through the void was not of flesh or blood, but of something ancient and eternal, like the whisper of wind through sacred chambers, where the prayers of countless souls had been recorded in the very fabric of existence itself. It was the voice of the Almighty, yet it carried within it the tenderness of a mother's lullaby and the strength of a father's protecting arm. The words fell upon Daniel's heart like gentle rain upon parched earth, each syllable a sacred seed that would bloom into understanding. "Chosen one," the voice began, "not with judgment, but with profound love. Your wrath will destroy you." The words were not spoken in condemnation, but in the deepest compassion that could be mustered by divine consciousness. They were the words of one who had watched the universe unfold its mysteries for eons, who had witnessed the beautiful tragedy of free will and its consequences. This was not the voice of an angry deity, but of one who understood that even the most terrible storms must pass, that even the darkest nights give way to dawn. Daniel felt his chest rise and fall with the weight of these words, as if he were breathing in the very essence of the divine itself. The writhing pain in his soul, the burning anger that had consumed him for so many years, suddenly seemed to shift and change. It was not that his rage disappeared entirely. It was too deeply rooted in his being, too intertwined with the very fabric of his identity. But something else began to stir within him, something that felt like a flame being kindled in the darkness, something that promised not destruction, but transformation. "Embrace divine peace and forgiveness," the voice continued, and in that simple instruction lay the entire mystery of redemption. Daniel's mind reeled at the audacity of such a request. How could he, who had suffered so greatly, who had seen so much injustice and cruelty, how could he simply embrace peace and forgiveness? Yet there was something about the way the words were spoken that made him understand that this was not a demand, but a gift, not a command, but a revelation. The spiritual mission that had been thrust upon him, this burden that had felt so heavy, so crushing, began to take on new meaning. He had thought it was about vengeance, about righting wrongs that had been done to him and his people. But now as the voice spoke, he began to see that it was something far more profound, far more beautiful. It was about becoming a vessel for something greater than himself, a conduit through which divine justice could flow, not in the form of retribution, but in the form of healing. The weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders, not because the problems were solved, but because he understood that his purpose was not to solve them alone. He was called to be a witness to the possibility of transformation, to show others that even in the deepest valleys of suffering, there could be found the seeds of redemption. The choice before him was not between justice and mercy, but between embracing both simultaneously, understanding that true justice was not the punishment of wrongdoers, but the restoration of their souls. As Daniel stood there, surrounded by the silence that spoke louder than any words, he felt his spirit begin to expand beyond the boundaries of his human limitations. He was no longer just Daniel, the chosen one, but something more, a bridge between the divine and the earthly, a living testament to the power of grace to transform even the most broken vessels. The wrath that had consumed him was not gone, but it was being redirected, channeled into something that could build rather than destroy, that could heal rather than wound. In that moment, he understood that his spiritual mission was not about escaping the darkness, but about walking through it with light enough to illuminate the path for others. His suffering had not been in vain. It had prepared him for this moment when he would become not just a recipient of divine grace, but a channel through which that grace would flow to a world that desperately needed to know that forgiveness was not weakness, but the ultimate expression of strength. The heavens trembled as the voice of divine judgment echoed through the sacred corridors of eternity, each syllable carrying the weight of cosmic justice that had been building since the first moment of human rebellion against the Almighty's perfect design. The chosen one stood at the precipice of destiny, his soul trembling like a leaf caught in the tempest of divine will, yet somehow finding solace in the very storm that sought to consume him. For in this moment of absolute vulnerability, he understood that his suffering was not punishment, but purification, not rejection, but redirection toward the sacred purpose that had been woven into his very essence from the beginning of time. The celestial beings who had watched from the upper chambers of heaven witnessed something transcendent unfold before their eyes. How the chosen one's heart, once heavy with the burden of mortality and sin, began to resonate with the frequency of pure love, the same frequency that had birthed all creation from the void. His tears fell not from despair, but from the overflow of divine compassion that now flowed through him, like rivers of light washing away the darkness of separation that had plagued humanity for millennia. Each drop contained the prayers of countless souls who had suffered in silence, their anguish transformed into the very fuel that would kindle the eternal flame of redemption. In the depths of his being, the Chosen One felt the presence of the Divine Mother, her maternal embrace wrapping around him like a cocoon of mercy, her voice whispering truths that had been waiting within his soul since the moment of his conception. "My child," she spoke her words like honey poured over burning coals. "Your pain is not your own. It is the collective sorrow of all who have ever loved and lost, all who have ever yearned for connection with the infinite. You are the bridge between what was and what shall be, the living testament to the power of grace over judgment." The cosmic dance of salvation began to unfold in slow motion, each movement choreographed by the hands of divine love itself. The Chosen One saw his reflection in the mirror of eternity, not as a broken vessel, but as a sacred chalice, its surface polished by centuries of suffering, its capacity expanded beyond measure to contain the wine of forgiveness that would transform the hearts of all who would drink from its cup. His wounds became the very wellsprings of healing, each scar a testament to the transformative power that could turn even the most bitter experience into the sweetest medicine for the world's wounded spirit. As he opened his heart completely to the divine will, the Chosen One became a conduit for the divine peace that transcends all understanding. A peace that does not come from the absence of conflict, but from the presence of love so profound that it makes all earthly battles insignificant. He understood now that his mission was not merely to suffer, but to demonstrate that suffering itself could be transmuted into service, that the deepest wounds could become the strongest vessels for compassion, that the darkest night could give birth to the brightest dawn. The cosmic order shifted subtly, the very fabric of reality, bending to accommodate this extraordinary demonstration of divine love in human form. Angels wept tears of joy as they witnessed the transformation of judgment into grace, the condemnation into redemption, the fear into faith. The Chosen One's acceptance of his divine purpose became a beacon of hope that pierced through the veil of earthly darkness, illuminating the path toward reconciliation between the divine and the human, between the perfect